Welcome to Inside Startup Investing, the only podcast where you can invest in every guest. On this episode, I will be speaking with the CEO of Rise Robotics, Hiten Sonpal. Rise Robotics is revolutionizing industrial machines by electrifying heavy machines with a faster, smarter, and cleaner alternative to hydraulics. Rise Robotics solution is a fluid-free actuator that combines the efficiency and speed of robotics with the power of heavy machinery to deliver superior performance at half the operating cost of hydraulics. A few things that I think you should listen for as an investor in this episode are: first, for you non-engineers out there, hydraulics have been the backbone of powerful equipment since the Industrial Revolution. Hydraulics power the strength of everything from excavators to forklifts and everything in between. The idea that there is a better, more powerful, and efficient technology for moving and lifting extremely heavy things is a massive, innovative breakthrough in the engineering realm that could have major, wide-spanning implications for industrial-grade strength machinery. Second, Rise Robotics was founded by a few brilliant minds, but they recognized their need to bring in a CEO that could commercialize the business. That level of self-awareness to hand over the reins to a proven executive is rarely seen, and I think is setting them up for long-term success. Lastly, Rise Robotics has a ton of long-term development opportunities for their technology. Quite literally, this new powerful technology can be applied to nearly any equipment that lifts or pushes heavy objects. But the team is focused on commercializing first in liftgates, then in forklifts, and so on. That commercial focus is going to help them start generating revenues far faster and hopefully drive faster adoption of their tech in market than going wide into many technologies too fast. This is an interesting one, a technology company on the cusp of major commercialization. So with that, let's get on to the show and welcome Hiten. So for those who don't know much about Rise Robotics, let's get into what Rise is all about. What do you guys do?
It might help if I just take a step back and talk about how Rise was founded. So the founders of Rise Robotics, three of whom went to MIT, decided that they wanted to build exosuits. So this is, for helping the elderly, for use by blue-collar workers in warehouses and things like that, for picking and lifting, and also for use by the Department of Defense. Kind of like an Iron Man suit, but without the jets. And so they wanted to build this thing, and they started to look at how they could do it and what technologies would be needed. And as they started looking at how they could apply forces to various joints, they realized that the hydraulic systems that existed today wouldn't work. They were too bulky, prone to failure, heavy, unreliable, and required a lot of extra sensors to be added to the systems. And so they started looking at ways to replace the hydraulic system. And then the team has created this thing that we call Beltdraulics. It's an order of magnitude better than hydraulic systems. There's no fluid in it. It uses belts instead of hydraulic oil. And because we use belts, we're very much an electromechanical actuator as opposed to an electrofluidic actuator. And that allows us to be very, very efficient. So we're 3 times faster than hydraulic systems. We're 3 times as efficient. We're 80% of the weight. And then we have built-in sensing. So we're AI and autonomy ready. So once the team sort of built these systems, they realized that instead of trying to create an exosuit market, they could just take this technology and apply it to the existing hydraulics market, which is a $600 billion industry.
Having grown up in a family of mechanical engineers, everyone has always said hydraulics, the things they can do, the force they can apply, it's incredible, right? And the idea of something mechanical in nature being to do that, it seems almost impossible in my head. Can you talk a little bit about the science and how that all actually works?
Yeah, and so I had the same reaction. I actually had a friend working at Rise Robotics, and I reached out to him just to catch up, and he told me what he was working on. And I said, there's no way. What hydraulics can do can't really be replaced. And he said, Hiten, you should look at the patents. So I started looking at the patents, and then I started to see the architecture. And then I realized, hey, there's something here. And so then I visited the facility, and I saw the actual actuators being used in tests, and they were lifting, 2 tons easily and repeatably. And there was a 22-ton actuator lying around in the facility. And I was just sort of really flabbergasted that not only did the patent seem to indicate that something was possible, but that it had been reduced to practice. So that got me really excited about figuring out a way to work with Rise. the technology is inspired by nature, right? One of the founders came out of one of the labs at MIT that's looking at biomimicry and looking at those functions and trying to replicate them in machines. And so when you think about muscles, they usually are fibers in tension, right? So you've got these muscle fibers, and even if you want to push something, you have fibers in a certain part of your body that are contracting. We rarely use fluids in compression to move things around. We're using fibers in tension. And so what the team had done is they found these new kinds of belts that hadn't existed 20 years ago. And these belts are now being used in elevators because they allow the elevators to go faster, and they're much smaller and more compact, and they're much more reliable and last the life of the building compared to the old steel ropes or steel cables that the elevators use. And what these belts are is they're polyurethane on the outside and they have steel fibers on the inside. And so they're really, really strong, environmentally resistant, flat, but they have, and they're very compact, but they have certain challenges. Like you can't bend and twist them without damaging the belts in ways where it doesn't meet its rating. And what the Rise team has figured out a way to do is to actually do that, to bend and twist these belts in a way that they can be compacted into an actuator. And ultimately on the inside, it's blocks and tackles, but the core IP is around how to twist belts and how to package them into this form factor and how to use that to translate energy.
So it's almost like human level strength. It's using kind of the same idea of muscles, and is that?
Yes,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah. That's what it looks like. The belts are in tension, and anytime we want to push or pull, we have belts that are pulling the rod of the actuator in one direction and then pulling the rod of the actuator in the other direction, compared to a hydraulic system where you'd be pushing the fluid in one direction and pushing the fluid in the other direction. So that's kind of the difference in the science. And then because we aren't pushing liquids through small holes and valves, there's no loss of energy. All the friction in the system is very intentional. We, without the motor, we're well over 90% efficient. And once we add the motors in, we're roughly 75% efficient. So that's from electric power in to linear work done on the output side. Very, very efficient system.
And how does that compare to hydraulics?
Hydraulics typically are 25% efficient. So we're 3 times as efficient. And in fact, we're so efficient that when we lower things as opposed to lifting them, we regenerate energy at the same efficiency. So 75% of the potential energy then gets converted back into electrical energy at the battery, just like if you had an electric car and once you're going very fast, you have the potential energy, the kinetic energy in the car, and you slow down and you can extract it and put it back into the batteries. We're able to do the same thing with potential energy.
All right, so let's
Correct.
talk about, you have this
Okay.
incredible technology. What specific problems are you now applying that to in order to commercialize this technology?
Yeah, so we've got I'd say three different thrusts. So one partnership is with the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is very interested in contested logistics and solving the problem of contested logistics, which is you have a forward location and you're trying to supply it with gasoline and power and all those things. So anything that can be done to improve the efficiency of the systems in the field reduces the logistic footprint and makes the entire chain more resilient. So if you're not able to get fuel for some time, there's enough of a stockpile and it lasts 3 times as long as it would if you had a hydraulic space system. So that's our partnership with the Department of Defense, and almost everything we do for them is funded, like I said, maybe for business development. Um, and there we partnered with them to build a material handling unit that would load planes for the Air Force. And we actually now have a partnership with the Army where we're exploring Army applications as well. And as part of building a prototype that can load planes, we ended up, accident, building the world's strongest robotic arm. So we're able to lift 7,000 pounds and manipulate it in 6 degrees of freedom, which is what makes it robotic. And the previous record was only 5,000 pounds. So we beat it by a considerable margin. And the company that held the previous record, which is still a record because it's in production and we still have a prototype, is a multi-billion-dollar company, and we're just an 18-person team. So it was very exciting to get that done for the Department of Defense. And the core technology, again, doesn't leak, is quiet, is fuel efficient, so you can use batteries or gasoline, and is faster, and has sensors built in. So if you wanted to, at some point in the future, make this airplane loading operation an autonomous operation, that's possible out of the box. So that's one thing that we're looking at. The second thing we're looking at is samples. And so what we want to do there is build relationships with OEMs, specifically large OEMs like Toyota and Volvo, um, that are that have huge hydraulic systems, either in forklifts or in construction machines. And certainly there are just a ton of markets there. And so we want to make our samples available first this year and then turn that into a cylinders business. And then our third thrust, which is the one that I think is going to help us become a unicorn, is we have a product that's a liftgate. And we're partnering with Anthony Liftgates. So we've done joint development on this product. And what it does is it replaces legacy hydraulic liftgates. Liftgates are used to deliver something that is typically loaded at a dock level and then delivered at ground level. So you think about, almost all the convenience stores, if you think about all the gas stations, all the CVSs, they typically don't have docks to take delivery of the day's merchandise. And so that gets delivered by truck on pallets, but the trucks themselves are loaded at docks. And so we have a partnership where we're building these lift gates, and the market is large. Roughly 50,000 lift gates are sold a year. And if we acquire 5% of the market, we'll be a unicorn. And what's interesting about this business is that it's a recurring revenue hardware business. So when you think about selling hardware, usually you have to acquire the customer over and over. But when we have conversations with our potential customers about liftgates and we say, how many units do you want? The answer typically is we want 30 units a year. We want 50 units a year. We want 100 units a year. And so at first I was surprised and I said, why are you stating this in sort of per year basis as opposed to just, these fixed contracts? And the response was, there's so much wear and tear on these products that we replace 15% of them a year. And so once we acquire a customer, the long-term value of the customer is practically infinite. Yes, the sales cycle is a little long because it's a B2B sale, but we're really excited about the prospects of this particular market. So it's a $2 billion market. And as I mentioned, we get 5% of it, we'll be roughly at 100 million in revenues. And if we're growing at a healthy rate, that's a unicorn right there.
So going in on the liftgate specifically, what is your advantage? Why would someone take this over a hydraulic one? All those liftgates are out there. They're working apparently on a day-to-day basis. So how is this better? Why are they willing to potentially even pay more for it?
Yeah, so existing liftgates certainly do the job, but they have challenges. I've asked our potential customers, what are your top 3 challenges with liftgates? And the answer is hydraulics, hydraulics, and hydraulics. And so I asked them to explain more. And so the things that happen is, first is, of course, you develop a leak, or when the system breaks, it's out of commission. That happens fairly often. The maintenance on hydraulics is complicated. And if you do have a failure somewhere, you have to think about remediation of the hydraulic oil, which is hazardous. So those are the things, and that creates paperwork and expenses. So those are things you have to deal with. And the hydraulic systems take up so much energy that often trucks will have dead batteries, especially with the passing of no idle laws. The truck batteries don't charge as much, and the hydraulic systems take a lot of energy. And so what our system does, well, first of all, it's faster. So there's a revenue increase by using our product. When you look at the food and beverage industry, typically the operator is spending 1 hour going up and down on the liftgate. When they use our product, they're spending only half an hour going up and down a liftgate. And what that means is an additional stop, which can be, depending on the business model, worth an additional $300 to $1,200 per stop per day, right? So the ROI just on the revenue side is huge. And then we have all the maintenance benefits where you really don't need to maintain this liftgate. And then the last piece is that we don't have any dead batteries, so you don't have any downtime and you don't have any lost revenues. One of our customers shared with us that every time a truck fails because the battery is dead, it costs them $1,500. And that typically happens 3 times a year. So they're spending $4,500 just bringing the truck back in for service. And during that time, they might have lost revenues, which they can't even quantify for me, which is if there was stock out somewhere and someone, instead of buying a Pepsi product, ended up buying a Coke product, well, that's revenue that's gone forever. So the ROI on this product is huge. It's roughly 6 months.
Let's hit on a touchy subject. So you're not the founder. It sounds like there's some kind of scientist, engineer type founders who kind of created the technology of Rise. And now you're kind of the higher gun CEO. So talk to me about how that came together. And, if you could be frank and honest, some of the challenges that come with being the non-founder executive and working with the founders in building the company?
Just picking up from my earlier story, which is I had a friend working here and I came and looked at Rise. I saw, the facilities, which actually had almost zero creature comforts. Almost all of the money has been spent in R&D, which is exactly what I like to see in a startup. That was exciting. And then I met the founders and they kind of got a sense of my skill set and they hired me as a consultant. And then at some part in the process, Aaron, who was the previous CEO and one of the co-founders, started asking me to take the suggestions I was giving to him and instead present them to the board. It was a little bit of a weird request, but I did what he asked. And then after a couple of those presentations to the board, he came around to me and said, okay, the board and I have talked and we'd like to bring you on as the CEO. And it was a little bit of a surprise. I tell people I was tricked, but I'm obviously flattered to have been given the opportunity. And then I joined as CEO in the May timeframe. And then 4 months later, Aaron told me, oh, by the way, I'm going to be taking a leave of absence because I'm going to have a baby. And so he left for a month on paternity leave, and he had given me enough time to come up to speed. So he had time to spend with family, which after taking on the role, I realized that he couldn't have done that if he was still CEO. And so now he's back with the company. He is our VP of Business Development. One of the things that's exciting about Aaron is that he is relentless when it comes to networking and finding ways to get to people. And so he's been awesome. He just, even before I joined Rise, he had built a network of followers of over 3,000 people that were following Rise. So that's been exciting, and he's been tremendous. And then the other founders are still doing their roles. So Blake is the CTO, and Blake has the same amount of relentlessness and passion for beating down the physics as Aaron has for beating down doors and saying hi to people. And Kyle is very customer focused and user focused, and he wants to make sure that our products delight the end user. Even though we're a B2B company and typically you're talking to the purchasing person and maybe the maintenance person, maybe the operators, well, actually the operations group, Kyle thinks about the user and how to make that experience amazing. So there's pull from the ground floor. So once we get into a customer, I'm confident that the operators will start to say, hey, can I have that truck instead? Because that's more efficient and it's smoother and it's quieter. And, I get done half an hour early as opposed to using the traditional hydraulic lift gates. And finally, Tomas, he's our chief engineer. And what Tomas is able to do is if you have an idea that's maybe half baked, he's like able to dive deep right into the kernel of what makes the idea interesting and then just pull that out and then turn anything, even if it was like a half-baked idea, into something that's really good. And then he's like tremendous at executing and making that happen. So all the founders have different and unique strengths that are different from mine. My focus is commercialization and productization. And each one of them now is in a position where they are applying their strengths in the things that give them energy.
One of the other challenges I imagine you've run into, you're a hardware company in a boring industry. Venture capitalists are horrifically bad at investing in companies like this, historically. So what capital raising challenges have you come up against, and how are you mitigating those?
Yeah, so this company is what is traditionally been called the valley of death, right? You raise a bunch of money and you've taken the science and converted it to engineering, and like you're very close. You reduced it to practice, but you still have to build a product and acquire customers. And this is where when I speak to traditional institutional investors, their response is, "You're so close. Why don't you just get to the next step, get these out to market, and then show us the growth rate, and then we're ready to invest." So that's the Series A and Series B investors, and the seed investors wanted to come in like 2 years ago. Right. So they're like, hey, our checks aren't that big. We want a larger piece of the business. This is really too late for us. This is not how we work. We want to spend a little bit of money across a lot of companies. And so the risk profile is different. So I found that to be challenging. The thing that I found interesting is that corporate venture arms are actually interested in talking to us. And what they all want to see is samples. So they want their engineering teams to evaluate the tech. And so we'll be releasing samples in the second half of this year. We're already in the second half, but here very quickly, we have a pipeline of roughly 10 to 20 customers, depending on how much NRE they want to put in to take the product and fit it into their particular application. And I hired a head of product to actually take down. We had so much incoming business on cylinders that I couldn't do the parsing and the racking and stacking and trying to figure out who's the best first customer, second customer, third customer to tackle. Um, so we're well on our way to being appealing to corporate venture arms, and that's going to happen sometime in Q4 or Q1 of next year when we'll have relationships built that have evaluated our cylinders, and we'll start talking to them about a Series B. So then I had to fill this gap in the middle, which from now to then. And I went to the board, and I had a couple of friends that I had success in crowdfunding. And I said, I'd like to try this crowdfunding option. And the reason why I did that is that when I joined, the board said, we'll back you as much as you need, but come to us as a last resort. We want you to raise money from outside firms if you can, because we had a couple of board members that are very close to 20% ownership, and they would prefer to stay underneath that because the reporting rules change and all that stuff. So, so then we launched on WeFunder. We did an exploration, and it's been outstanding. The demand has been crazy. We just, we're at 2.4 million was our target, and we're oversubscribed by 10%. And so we're going to have to extend the round again. And so we just filed our Form C, and any day now we're going to announce that we're extending our round. And it's been exciting to see that not only do we get a lot of interest, we have over 1,300 investors now, but we had companies like King's Crowd Capital look at the deal and look at our deal terms, which are the same as our previous round. We just opened up our previous round, very similar to our previous round. So it was a really good deal for retail investors that typically can't get deals that institutionals get. So you guys basically said, hey, this is a good deal, and you came in and you invested. And then in addition to that, these 1,300 retail investors are all, as they're investing, they're sending me information about, okay, I can help you find customers. I can help you find other investors. Let's hop on a call. And so I joke that I now have the largest sales team in Massachusetts. I have a team of, 1,300 people that I could go to and say, hey, can you be our advocate here and there? And they're all willing to support. So that's been very exciting.
That's fantastic. On the manufacturing side, what's going to need to occur? Do you need to build a facility in order to start commercializing the business and be able to actually support the customers you bring on?
Yeah, so with the liftgate product in particular, our partnership with Anthony is such that Anthony will be building the liftgate. So we already have the manufacturing infrastructure in place. We will be building the initial cylinders ourselves, and then there's the plan to go get a contract manufacturer. We've done an initial survey of who's out there. We've also talked to a lot of states that offer grants for starting up manufacturing in the United States, which we're excited about. So our next step would be to identify that CM. But one of the things I'm a big believer in is we need to do infrastructure just in time, because we want to be spending all of our money on customer acquisition now and on refining the product. And as soon as we get to the point where we feel like we have the demand, we have the backlog, then it makes sense to then immediately flip and start spending the money to bring a contract manufacturer on board. Having done that several times, I know that it can be a little expensive, and it can be time consuming and distracting for the team to do that. So I want to wait and do that only when it makes sense.
In terms of kind of sales and generating revenue, do you see 2026 as kind of the year where the light turns on and you really start to drive in revenues from selling these liftgate technologies?
Yes, definitely. That's going to be a huge year for us. And we're also hoping to do some things this year. So definitely 2026 is where you'll be able to see the trajectory and you'll be able to see the ramp. And it's going to be a very exciting time. But the second half of this year is also going to be exciting because we're testing our products. We're doing live testing, and soon we'll post videos of the progress the product has made. And then we're getting ready for our next build in September. So we've taken our lift gates, we've run them through a battery of engineering tests. We've found a set of issues, and we're working to close those down. So we'll be able to share all of that with our investors here shortly. So this is an exciting year for us as well.
That's awesome. What is the next frontier for Rise? Beyond lift gates, do you see applying the technology to multiple different areas already? Do you have them on the roadmap? Or is it like, hey, let's penetrate and own this piece of the market, and then we could explore those other avenues?
Yeah, so the next big frontier for us is forklifts. We have a partnership with Danfoss where we're working jointly on a forklift application, a proof of concept. And the that the forklift market is huge. It's between $8 billion to $16 billion, depending on how you count it. 4 times as big as lift gates. And it's an ideal application for our technology. Imagine a situation where you're trying to unload a container ship. As long as the end effector that's moving up and down is equal to the weight that we're lowering up and down, we can recharge the system perpetually, right? So we can have a really small battery, and that system that's in the unloading application can run 24/7. So it's things like that that make forklifts very exciting for us.
For investors who are kind of on the line, they think this is really cool, it's exciting, but they're not there yet. I'll give you the last word. What do you want them to know?
There's nothing like this technology, right? So one of the reasons why I decided to join Rise is as I saw what the team had built, I've never seen anything like it before. It's a new kind of mechanism that hasn't existed before, and we have a huge patent moat, which makes us very appealing. And you can learn more about what we do on wefunder.com/Rise Robotics.
If you like what you heard on the show today, you can check out why Rise Robotics received a 4.7 out of 5 and an investment from Kingscrowd Capital at kingscrowd.com. You can also invest on WeFunder until April 2026.